It's January 10th, 2018, and the Supreme Court had just heard oral argument in Husted versus A. Philip Randolph Institute, a case the ACLU brought to attack the Ohio rules on voter purging. John Husted, the Ohio Secretary of State, is walking down the steps of the Supreme Court, and in front of him, he sees Em Helle, an Ohio citizen who was purged from the voter rolls and lost his right to vote.
This is Blue Wave Pod. I'm your host, Eric Heffinger.
And I'm Sohan Manik.
And today we are interviewing Mayor Em Helle, who came to our attention because of this Supreme Court case. But there is much more to him than that.
Mayor Helle is an Army vet and the mayor of a small town called Oak Harbor. It's about 30 miles east of Toledo and has a population of about 2,800 people.
There's a cliche that says all politics are local. And I think after listening to this interview, I walked away thinking he really embodies that.
You know, we've been talking a lot about national issues on the podcast. We've talked to two candidates who are running for the United States Congress and two voters about their views on national issues. But we know that if a blue wave is going to happen, it has to happen on every level, not just the national level, from our state house to our mayor's office.
So we hope you enjoy our interview with Mayor Em Helle.
Joe, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having me.
You came to our attention because of the voter purge that is happening in the state of Ohio. And saw a YouTube video that's being passed around social media of your confrontation with John Husted on the steps of the Supreme Court. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved in this whole case?
Accidentally, plain and simple. So back in 2011, I came home from the Army, found out that I couldn't vote in the November general election and that I'd been purged. A local newspaper at the time picked up the story, but there wasn't anything else beyond that. Fast forward to 2017, I saw a post on Facebook last June, to be honest with you, from Progress, Ohio, and it was talking about the Supreme Court case regarding voter purges. So I commented on the post and said, hey, I'm a veteran. I was purged in 2011, and didn't really make anything of it after that. But lo and behold, people started calling me left and right from different organizations. The ACLU of Ohio reached out, Progress Ohio reached out, Let America Vote, and some other organizations to get my story and some background. At which point that kind of tapered off over a few weeks. And then at the end of December, I got a phone call from the Associated Press asking for a story. Somebody from the legal team had forwarded my information to the newspaper there, and that kind of started the whole ball rolling. Once the Associated Press gets something out, everyone else bites.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the voter purge and the Supreme Court case that's going on right now. I don't think a lot of people know about Ohio and the arcane voter purge rules that we have. So what happened to you? You were serving the country abroad, and then you lost the right to vote. How?
By not being active in voting. It's not exactly the easiest thing. When you're an infantryman in the military, to hit the local voting booth. It might be easy for National Guardsmen and women, which is great. They're usually home and they do the, their training once every month and, their time in the summertime. But when you're active duty as an infantryman, you're either in a combat zone or you're training to head to one. And there wasn't really a whole lot of time, whether it be as an infantry private or a sergeant or anything like that, to head on down to the voter assistant office and say, hey, I'd like to vote. And you especially can't do that while you're deployed. That being said, I did vote from Iraq in 2006, and that ballot never made it for some reason. So essentially, I was off serving for 6 years, came back home, attempted to vote, and found out that I couldn't because of inactivity.
Now, I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate here. The argument here from the Republicans a lot is that they need to purge these because they don't want voter fraud. They don't want people that are passed away or moved out of the state to people pretending to be them. So if that's the case, that's what they're trying to do. How should they take care of that? Do you think that the purging these voters?
Well, first, I think the idea that there's fraud is a fallacy. It's been proven across the country, even in our own state, that voter fraud is rare and doesn't really exist. In the 2016 presidential election, for instance, there was something like 250 total cases forwarded for prosecution, and that's out of 11 million people. Now, the argument could be, they're working hard to purge individuals and that's why the fraud is down. But I'm not buying it. Really, to me, what that whole purpose is, and I don't want to just attack the Republican Party. This has been something that, unfortunately, Democrats have taken advantage of as well. By not allowing it and by purging individuals, you're stopping the ability for somebody to come out and vote when there's an issue that truly means something to them. You saw it with the Trump election. People started coming out of the woodwork to vote, and unfortunately, those individuals may not vote very often, but they voted, enough that they wouldn't be purged in the past. But really, the fraud part, I don't see where it's at, and there hasn't been any concrete evidence that it occurs.
Yeah, isn't it kind of nuts that people, even without any concrete evidence, people can still believe? I mean, I know Trump himself says 3 to 5 million people voted illegally and through fraud.
It's kind of a boogeyman story that they create.
And you can see that Mr. Trump's campaign to find voter fraud failed in epic proportions to the point where the entire team was, the whole organization that was created was torn apart basically and told to go home. Even they couldn't find it, and their idea was they'll just blame the states for not turning over the information. But
which was a crazy request as well.
Yeah, especially for for the Republican Party, for the party that wants to enhance federalism and send power back to the states, to try to take that power at the federal level and say, hey, states, we don't believe you and we don't trust you, so we're going to do it ourselves. That was kind of mind-boggling to me.
Oh, absolutely. It's the principles and politics getting all mixed up together, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. As mayor and as someone that is running for an Ohio House seat, what do you think you can do to change it so that people have better rights to voting? What would you like to see in the law?
I want to see that first and foremost, that we have same-day registration, same-day voting. So if we want to keep the voter purging in place, fine. But when you're a responsible adult and you want to go vote, why shouldn't you be able to provide the same information that you would need when you register to vote? Go to the Board of Elections office, submit that information on that day and say, hey, here's a utility bill. Here's my state driver's license that says I reside here. Let me vote today. So that would be the first thing. And you see candidate for Secretary of State Kathleen Clyde pushing that one very strongly, and there's really no good reason not to do it. Second off, remove this archaic policy from Ohio that we're going to purge people. Arbitrarily following up and then skirting federal law by saying they're not, taking people off the rolls because of inactivity. They're taking them off the rolls because they didn't, respond to a postcard. Get rid of that whole mechanism completely, and just allow people to do their due diligence. If they move, allow them to change their address. They shouldn't have to be followed up by the state every couple of years to make sure they're doing that. It's not immigration. It's voting.
Well, we're very glad you accidentally got involved, and the YouTube video is quite powerful, and we'll post it to our website so people can take a look as well.
So I'm going to go back in time a little bit here. You're mayor of Oak Harbor. You became mayor in 2015. Do I have that right?
I was elected at the end of 15, took office at the beginning of 16, correct.
Gotcha. Can you tell us a little bit about how you went from being in the military to getting involved in politics and how you decided to really run for mayor?
I got a letter in the mail. Be honest, and it said that parking was going to be banned in front of my house, and I live right in the center of town on the widest street in the entire community. And this letter said that parking is going to be banned in front of your home. If you want to make comment on it, come to a meeting at this day and time. And I said, nobody came and knocked on my door. What's going on here? So I went up to the village and talked to the administrator at the time, and they said that a councilwoman, her brother's sister-in-law, was upset that in the wintertime, the snowplow wouldn't plow up to her curb because the neighbor parked his car in the street. And I said, well, that's not right. This lady didn't come and knock on any doors, didn't do a single ounce of diligence to see what the rest of, the neighborhood wanted. She was only, reacting in a knee-jerk fashion. Yeah, I see this, somebody I know has a problem. I'm going to try to, fix it for them. So I knocked on all the neighbors' doors, and they said, no, we don't want parking banned. And the only person that did was the lady with the complaint. So I did some research and found out that the road is actually a snow emergency route. So I went to the council meeting that I was invited to raised a stink, to be honest with you, because it was just asinine that this was even being considered, and successfully talked the council out of wanting to do this. But at that point, I saw that, wow, there's an issue here. This isn't how people should be governed. So I started going to meetings, and I started seeing fundamental issues with leadership, as in there was none. The council didn't communicate with the community at all. People weren't going to council meetings, so really it was Wild West. They were just doing whatever they thought they wanted to do, with really no effect from the people that lived in Oak Harbor. So fast forward down to 2015, I was going to run for council. Had a lot of support for that, but people started saying I should run for mayor because, being more communicative like I was, they thought maybe a stronger leader at the top would make more sense and have a better influence than being on a council with 6 other people. So I ran for mayor and had a heck of a good following. I did my diligence. I spent 6 weeks with all the free time I could muster going to every single door in town. You're talking about 1,100, doors total that I went to. I did the parade in town, and I really worked it hard, and people saw that and appreciated it. And fortunately and thankfully, they elected me. That's kind of my story, how I got there.
We keep talking to people about encouraging them to get involved locally and what they can do. And I mean, I don't think you can get any more local than my street. My one street had an issue, and that's really what spurred me into this bigger cause.
Absolutely. And if I could walk down that subject a little bit, we see people forgetting about that street. We see people forgetting about that park with the national news cycle. We have such a push from the top anymore that even our local news stations and our local newspapers are struggling with local content because of affordability or what it may be. So, the local newspapers, for instance, they use a lot of USA Today pieces because they're a part of that network. The local news station up in Toledo, they're all affiliated with a larger station, so they've got lots of, national news, but the local community news is not there as much. So people have lost kind of touch with those local issues because it's not actually being fed to them anymore, which is where I come in. I've taken advantage of social media and the way people communicate nowadays, and communicate with my community that way. I love newspapers, but my generation, your generation, we don't necessarily walk down the street reading a paper. We're walking down the street with our iPhone or our Android, and being able to communicate with people the way they want has been beneficial.
So as mayor of Oak Harbor, I don't think a lot of people know exactly what it's like to be mayor on a day-to-day basis. How does that work when you communicate with people? I mean, do you feel like you have a lot of citizen contact? Is it a lot more administrative? Or is it just fixing problems and every day is a different day?
First and foremost, I'm the ear to the town. Before I came into office, in a smaller village or in a village in Ohio, you have what's called a weak mayor system. I don't have a whole lot of authority with decision making. Council holds most of that authority. However, I still do lead the administration. With that, in the past, in my community and many communities around, elected officials are nowhere to be found. So the responsibility for running the day-to-day operations is placed on the administrator. And in Ohio, the village administrator within the village system is responsible for public works and utilities. He's not necessarily responsible for, resident complaints, citizen complaints, issues that they're having in the community. So I've personally taken a lot of that weight off of his shoulders so that he can pay more attention to what he's statutorily required to do, which is maintain public service. So being able to communicate with folks, have that open ear. When I took office, I blasted out my cell phone number. I said, here you go. You can call me anytime you want, 24 hours a day.
Did they?
Some people have, absolutely. But again, people typically communicate through Facebook with me because that's where their faces are. That's where they're attached to. So there's been plenty of times where I've got a Facebook message at 10 or 11 o'clock at night, wanting with an issue. Hey, they've got raw sewage in their basement because it rained really hard and they're having issues with it or something like that. So I've made myself the point man for communication from our residents, as well as communicating with them and providing information versus them just not knowing what's going on or them going right to my administrator.
That type of organization and leadership, your time in the Army, 7 years in Iraq and Afghanistan, how do you think that influenced you and sort of brought you to where you are today?
You lead from the front. And the reason I'm even in the seat I am is because in the absence of leadership, take leadership. And when I have a very specific way that I see it, you lead from the front. And I'll put it in just general layman's terms. I always eat last. I always want to make sure that, and that's true anywhere I go. That's true in my own kitchen. It's true if we have a potluck at the office. I make sure everyone else is taken care of. I make sure that my employees eat first. I'm the last one to eat. I'm the last one to benefit from anything. And I want to make sure that they are getting what they need. Want to make sure that they are succeeding in their challenges or their everyday life. And I put myself second to them or second to my family or whatever I'm doing, because it's just browbeat into you in the Army, selfless service. And to be able to do that and be able to come out of the military after leading like that and living that life has just provided people with a different understanding of, hey, this is what we work for now. This guy cares about us. And when you do that, people want to stay. It's tough to pay people in a local community because you don't make as much money as a city would through taxes. So we've had to create and foster an environment for our employees where they're happy to work there now, because we were losing employees like crazy before I came in. So to take that leadership from the Army and those experiences, and to top that, the things I've done in the Army, high stress, they really, test every bit of your patience and might, and to transfer that over into civilian life, really, there's not anything that stressful. So it makes that experience a little bit easier, where I think other people would be struggling sometimes.
That attitude of service I find so interesting, because we recently spoke with Ken Harbaugh, who who I think
Yep.
And obviously he's running for the Ohio 7th. It seems like there is this push to have people who have served in the military run for political office. I mean, do you see that? Would you encourage people who've served before to run and step up now, especially now?
I absolutely do, but I would encourage them not to stay around forever. Even in the military, you didn't hold a position forever. You either moved up or you moved on. And we start to see stagnation with everybody in elected office when they stick around too long. And I think you'll start seeing from my generation of veterans, Ken's generation of veterans, and the generation that's going through right now at 18 or 19 years old, that they won't want to stick around in the realm of politics forever. They're going to see a problem. They're going to want to go ahead and fix it because that's what they've been trained to do. And then once that problem is fixed, they're going to move on. And that's, for me, that's exactly what I want to do. I don't want to be in politics forever. I can't wait to delete the Facebook, get rid of the Twitter, and go silent. But while I'm here, I'm going to work as hard as I can to make this place good for my children. And if I'm making it, the environment good for my children, I'm making it good for everyone else's children as well. And that's really my goal, and that should be everyone's goal.
Well, you said you were talking about moving up or moving on, and you are now running for the Ohio State House, and you're running in the Ohio 89th District. What is it about, you said you got to have a purpose. So what is your purpose here for running for a bigger office now?
When I ran for mayor, I ran because I saw issues fundamentally with the community that I didn't agree with or that I didn't believe in. So I ran, and when I took office, I was warned, hey, don't do everything at once because you're going to run out of things to do. And I kind of did that. So when I took office, I had some goals: communicate more, bring money to our parks, see our employees stay, get our police department some funding. And I've done that. But the things that I cannot fix are things like my infrastructure. My wastewater treatment plant backs up because ever-changing rules and regulations from the Ohio and federal EPA, for instance. We can't keep up with it, and we can't keep up because of a money issue. So I look to the state, and when the state says, yeah, we aren't going to help you or there's nothing we can do, I start wanting to problem solve at a higher level to bring relief back to my community. If you've been following the news around my area over towards south of Cleveland a little bit with the Perry Nuclear Power Station or the Davis-Besse Nuclear Power Station, that was kind of the last straw for me.
Can you tell us what's happening with that there for listeners not around the area?
Absolutely. First Energy is struggling. Unfortunately, when the natural gas and oil boom came in, they didn't jump on the bandwagon. They didn't think that it would be a prolonged business affair that they could get into and profit, is my understanding. So they stuck with their nuclear power generation. And over time, the price of natural gas bottomed out and made it so energy became very affordable and nuclear power became more expensive. So they started losing money. And when they start losing money, they start, looking to shareholders, unfortunately. Shareholders were very upset that they weren't making money. And First Energy starts posting losses up to the tune of around $1 billion, I believe. And when they do that in the state of Ohio, this state unfortunately has what's called an acceptable accounting practice when it comes to business losses, to where if your profit margin falls and you're losing money, the state of Ohio allows you to devalue your property tax assessment values. So when Davis-Besse and First Energy did that last October, my school district lost $4.5 million.
Wow.
Prior to that, there was legislation proposed from one of the representatives out where the Perry nuclear station is, and my local, the current state rep here, Steve Arndt, did not come out and publicly endorse it or support it at all. He didn't co-sponsor it, nor did Randy Gardner, the senator, who's the floor majority leader in the Senate. And that was the final straw for me, because politics aside, this is 700 jobs in your district. This is millions and millions and millions of dollars of local economy, contributions from residents and whatnot, plus my school inside my city limits. So you start looking at property tax losses to the school district. They have to make that up. You can't cut your way out of a quarter of your budget. So they're looking at already putting a levy on the ballot here in May. That's going to create an issue where my residents can't afford to live here anymore. And when you do that, people start having to move out, and you start losing the biggest draw that our community has, which is our school. Because you can't afford to go there anymore. You can't afford to live here. And to see no relief from the state at all, and what kills me is that when that legislation was sitting there, instead of supporting it in the Senate, Mr. Gardner decided he wanted to go ahead and fight abortion and push some legislation on the floor instead regarding that. So you can see where the priorities are. And then in the last couple of weeks, now the campaign season's in full swing. They've decided to go ahead and start trying to orchestrate some meetings and be on TV about it and garner up some support, saying, hey, we care about this. But I've been fighting back as hard as I can, said, hey, you didn't support it at all. You are inviting local leaders to come to these meetings, and a few photo opportunities aren't going to make you, the saving grace anymore. First Energy said they're done. Now what are you going to do?
It's going to affect a lot of people are going to be affected by this immediately around you, your neighbors, people you care about.
That nuclear plant, if it closes, that generates power for us. It generates power for Toledo and Southeast Michigan. Those prices are going to go up because now the state of Ohio is going to have to import more power than it is able to create. We already import something like 15% of our power usage comes from out of state plants, and now you're up to 27 to 30% import, and now our power costs go up as well. So there's really a lot of a lack of foresight. That was very short politically, I think, that they didn't want to support it. And they're playing games with people in this region and in these communities and in my district specifically.
We started this podcast because our goal with Blue Wave is to create a blue wave. It's to flip districts. And the one you're running in, the Ohio House 89th, is interesting because it voted for Obama in 2008 and 2012, but then voted for Trump in 2016. So obviously something is happening there. And I'm wondering, as someone that's very politically involved as a mayor and then is now running for a higher office, what are you seeing on the ground there? What has changed?
I will tell you that voters here are disenfranchised. Um, Ted Strickland, for instance, he's a great guy, but Ohio turned him down when he lost to Kasich. And for him to be the candidate, for instance, for Senate during that race was a poor choice to me, in the last Senate race. Because that he was just being forced down our throats. There was no significant primary, and we were given Ted Strickland, and we got what we got. He certainly lost, unfortunately. Miss Clinton wasn't selling a message that resonated with anyone around here. She was stuck on big social issues, and she wasn't talking about, hey, we need to really bring jobs to these local communities. She wasn't talking about, hey, we need to fix infrastructure. And neither was Mr. Trump, to be honest with you. However, he talked in a way that people kind of understood, which is they're fed up with government. They're fed up with the status quo and business as normal. And Hillary Clinton was that business as normal, and Donald Trump was that curveball that you wouldn't be able to hit no matter how many times you try. And people came out of the woodwork because of it. They said, wow, I'm fed up with how things are going. Congress is broke. The presidency is broke. We're going to try something new. And certainly we got what we paid for. He's not doing the greatest by any means. However, Ottawa County and Erie County in this district is really not different than any other place. Donald Trump knocked it out of the park. He told people what they wanted to hear, and they were oblivious and didn't care about anything they heard about him. He was telling people, arrest him, beat him up. I'll pay your lawyer bills.
Yeah.
and so for me, people were just tired of politics as normal. Me too. I didn't vote for president at all. I didn't see a candidate that made sense to me.
Yeah, well, I think you were purged anyway, weren't you? So
No. In 2016, I was fine. I was
purged, right, okay.
Purged in 11. I've voted ever since.
Great. Well, can't thank you enough for joining us. I mean, this is an incredible story. We're really pulling for you. We hope you keep in touch. And I just want to say that ever since we knew that we were interviewing you, that your campaign slogan is one of my favorites. So give him Helle, sir.
Got to give him Helle. Helle on wheels. We'll get the t-shirt. We'll get the t-shirts out soon.
Yeah. Send them this way.
Absolutely. Well, hey, thank you guys so much for bringing awareness to the election cycle this year. These off cycles are certainly hard to hit, and the more reach we have, the better. So thank you for having me.
No kidding though. I really do want one of those t-shirts.
Yeah, me too. You can hit us up on Twitter when you got those in, and we will take a picture with those on. I promise you.
I honestly can't wait to see what the future holds for Mayor Helle.
Yeah, I found it really interesting when he was talking about the service and maybe the true meaning of what service is. The idea that you do it for just a short time and then leave the stage when your time is done, not stick around too long.
Doesn't sound like any politicians I know.
No, it's quite interesting that something that could be so small, like a problem with your parking, could eventually lead to being the mayor of your city and then running for the state house. I mean, again, like the people we talked to so far, it's inspirational. It's interesting. It's something I think really grabs the attention and makes them stand out.
Well, we hope you liked that talk as much as we did. And you can always find us at our website at www.bluewavepod.com or on Facebook or Twitter.
And if you could please go on iTunes and rate this podcast, it really helps us out a lot and helps new listeners find us.